Hi, and welcome to Jules Voto's Photo Focus. In this video, I'm going to be comparing two vintage Nikon 35mm wide-angle lenses. The 35 2.8 pre-AI, which was originally introduced in 1959. The version I have here dates from 1972. It is not multi-coated. And we're going to be comparing it to the 35mm 2.0 AIS, which dates from 1981 and is multi-coated. The original version of this lens came out in 1965. Well, first we're going to go over the specs on the 35 2.8 pre-AI. But before I do, just remember to subscribe to my channel and tap that bell if you like content like this. So the 35 2.8 was actually the first wide-angle lens I bought when I switched over to Nikon from Pentax back in 1973. I actually got my first Nikon in late 72 and bought this lens in 1973. Now, this isn't the original lens that I bought back then because I traded it in on another lens, but I picked this one up a few years ago. So let's go over the specs. Okay, so there are 7 elements in 6 groups. Like a lot of the Nikkor lenses from this era, it took 52mm filters. It's a real compact, lightweight lens. It weighs 200 grams or 7 ounces. It's, of course, all metal construction, 6 blades in the aperture, and it goes from 2.8 to f16 in full click stops. Okay, now we have the 35mm 2.0 AIS lens, which is multi-coated. And I picked this lens up originally in 1981 after buying the Nikon F3 because I needed AIS lenses for the F3. And I sold or traded in, I don't remember now, the 35 2.8. So this lens is 8 elements in 6 groups. It has 7-bladed aperture, goes from 2.0 to f22 in full click stops. It weighs 10 ounces or 283 grams. So it's a little heavier than the 2.8, of course. And like the 2.8, it's all metal construction, but it does have a rubber insert on the focusing ring. Both lenses take 52mm filters, as I said earlier. And both lenses also use Nikon's HN3 screw-in metal lens shade. That shade also works with the 35 1.4 as well as the 43 to 86 zoom. It also works great on Nikon's modern 40mm 2.0 Z-mount lens. Okay, so let me explain the testing and then we'll go over the images. So I use my standard test setup, and the camera was a Nikon Z8. For the manual focus lenses, I used the F to Z adapter. The camera was 5.5 feet. Actually, the focal plane was 5.5 feet from the 300mm lens just to the right of the mannequin head. And I focused on the 50-foot mark on that lens. I used 2 LED lights. I have my ISO set to 400. Was set for standard picture control. I did a custom white balance off a gray card for each lens. As I changed lenses, I redid the custom white balance. And I took an incident light meter reading and the reading at 2.0 was 1/125th of a second. And as I closed down the aperture 1 stop, I increased the exposure time 1 stop. Okay, so this was the first shot. This was the 35 2.8 on the left, and that's where it's going to be. 35 2.8 will be on the left. 35 2.0 will be on the right. So in this first shot here, the 2.8 was wide open at 2.8, and the 2.0 was wide open at 2.0. I just wanted to see how 2.0 compared to 2.8. And both, you could see vignetting on both lenses, but it's a little more prominent on the 2.8. Now we're going to look at cropped images in a few minutes, both the center and left and right edges. But I know it's difficult, especially if you're looking at these images on your phone or even on a monitor. It might be difficult to see sharpness. So what I have done, I have put a link to all the JPEG images, even more than we're going to see in this video, on an online gallery, and the link will be in the description below. So click on that link. You could download and view all these images, which are right out of the camera, not cropped, the full image, and you could come to your own conclusions as far as sharpness and other factors. Okay, so this is the second image, and this is the 35 2.8, again on the left at 2.8. And now I stop the 35 2.0 down to 2.8. So you could see overall the image from the 2.8 is a little bit darker. And also the vignetting is much more prominent than on the 35 2.0. So again, the exposures were the same. So the reason it's darker is maybe the transmission on this lens, the light transmission, isn't as good. So now we go to f4. And you could see the vignetting on the 35 2.0 is virtually gone, where you can still see some on the 2.8. And now the exposures are a little closer. Here we go to 5.6, and the vignetting has improved. On the 2.8, you can still see a little bit of it. But also, it's still, the overall image seems a little bit darker than the image from the 2.0. Okay, so now we go to f8, and again, for all practical purposes, the vignetting is gone. Again, I still think that the image on the left is a little bit darker, even though the exposures for both images were exactly the same, and basically the same thing here at f11. Okay, so now we're going to look at a center crop just into the center of the image. And this is a 2.8 on the left and the 2.0 at 2.0 on the right. And still looks a little darker, the image on the left, but sharpness, I would say the 2.0, even though it's a 2.0, is sharper than the 35 2.8 at 2.8 in the center. Now, if you look at the JPEGs that you can download, you will see this much better, much more clearly. Okay, so now we're going to go to both lenses at 2.8. The image from the 35 2.8 still is a little darker, and although it sharpens up, I still think that the 35 2.0 at 2.8 is sharper. So now we're going to look at the left edge on both lenses at 2.8. And the 35 2.0 on the left is much sharper than the 35 2.8. And it's not just at the edge. It starts not too far off from center. Now, I was a little surprised when I looked at the right edge, and you could see here also that the 35 2.8 is darker, but the 35 2.8 on the right is sharper than the 35 2.0 on the right. So, what could be the reason for this? Could both lenses be decentered so that they're less sharp on one side than the other? I had that years ago with a Canon zoom lens that I owned, and one side was very sharp. I forget if it was the left or the right, and the other wasn't. So I ended up selling it, trading it in on a different lens. So that could be the issue, but I'm not sure. So let's look at some additional images. So what we have here is the center portion at 5.6 for both lenses. Now I skipped over f4. I didn't want to make this video too long. So I skipped over f4 and f8. But if you download the images, you will have all the images that were shot. So here at f5.6, the left image still is a little bit darker, but sharpness has really improved for the 2.8 so that they are pretty close, almost almost identical. Again, take a look for yourself at the JPEGs and see what you think. Okay, now we're at the left edge again, and it's the same story at f5.6. The left side on the 2.0 is much sharper than the 2.8. Now we go over to the right side. Again, much of the same. I think both images look to be about the same density now, but again, the 2.8 is sharper on the right side. And now we go to f11, which is going to be the final aperture we tested for this video. And center is almost identical as far as the edges. So now at the left side again, still the edge goes to the 2.0, but the sharpness from center to the left extends on the 2.8, although when you get to the far edge, the 2.0 is much sharper. Now we're going to look at the right, and right is much better on the 2.0, so I would say at this point it's just a slight edge to the 2.8. Okay, so what I decided to do after seeing these results is comparing images from the 2.0 to the 24 to 70 2.8 Z-mount lens, which is an excellent lens. So I set that lens up at 35 millimeters and ran through the range from 2.8 to f11. And here we see them both at 2.8. And you can see, oh, by the way, the zoom is on the right. And you could see that the vignetting on the zoom is greater. There's more vignetting. I think overall the image is a little bit darker. But remember, the exposure was exactly the same. I used that same incident light meter reading. Nothing was changed as far as the lighting. And I think overall, in the center and going out a bit, that the zoom is definitely sharper at 2.8 center and out a little. Now, when we go to the edges, there's no contest. The zoom at 2.8 is much sharper than the 35 2.0 on the left. And when we go to the right, same story. This was the weakest part, the right edge for the 2.0, and the zoom is much better. So I only tested 2 apertures, at least in this video. You will see all the apertures I tested in the link to the gallery. And here at 5.6, the centers are pretty close. I think the image from the 24 to 70 at 35 is a little darker, but sharpness is very close for these lenses. And that's saying something for a lens that's over 50 years old. So here we go to the left edge at 5.6, and I think the left is a little bit better on the zoom at 5.6, and the right is definitely sharper, as you will see here. I hope you can see, but again, please download all the images from the gallery, look at them, and make your own determination as to sharpness and any other factors. But if you look at the color, it's pretty darn close, if not exact. Okay, so before I end this video, I just want to explain, if you're looking at the pictures that you've downloaded from the gallery, you're going to see an index card below the mannequin head on each image. And it will have the lens at the top, and then each of the apertures that were tested. The aperture in this example was f2.0 for the 35 2.0 AIS. On this one, you see 5.6 is circled, is the last one circled, I should say. That is the aperture. If you see all these apertures circled, 2, 2.8, 4, 5.6, and f8, then f8 was used. I hope that helps. Okay, so I guess that's it for this video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. And please leave any questions you may have in the comments below. I am happy to answer your questions. Now, these lenses are readily available on the used market. You will find the 35 2.8 anywhere from $50 to $100, of course, depending on condition, and the AIS 35 2.0 is more like in the $150 to $200 range. So thanks for watching, and I will talk to you next time.